to open up our lives, not just to your direct work, but also to those around us, the other, the poor. To open ourselves up in love is not just for your glory, but it's also the best thing we can do for ourselves. Lord, I pray this morning as we hear Paul speak, Lord, you will remind us again of that fact. You will establish it in our hearts that it is true and good and beautiful, Lord, for us to live lives beyond ourselves, to the glory of God and the betterment of our brothers and sisters.
Time back, gave our mission a whole lot of money to do a whole lot of work in Central America. Thank you so much for your help. I really appreciate it, eh? So I'll talk a wee bit about that this morning. Do you want to flip on that next one, bro? That's it. So that's who we are. And we work amongst really vulnerable young people. And they're the sort of kids who, in the case of girls, could end up being sex trafficked. And in the case of boys, they could end up becoming gang members or child soldiers and that kind of stuff. So they're really vulnerable people in most circumstances. And so I used to live in Tokoroa, and then from Tokoroa, my wife and I, we shifted over to Thailand. We lived in Thailand as missionaries for 12 years. And then we got invited to go to Myanmar, Burma, and set up work there. And then from there into Cambodia and then, you know, all those other places. And in recent times, we've set up in Central America, in El Salvador and Honduras, which is where you guys have been supporting us. So they're the original boys in Thailand. That's in a slum near Klong Toi in Bangkok that we worked with. And they were child prostitutes, those three boys down below. And then just as the work morphed and developed, we started setting up a whole lot of other kids. My daughter-in-law is in there. Can you see my daughter-in-law, Jairus? My daughter-in-law is in the front row in the yellow. So we had a boys' work and a girls' work, again, where we're trying to develop Christian leadership. So that's kind of what we've done for a long time. Now, when there's about 5 minutes to go, you're going to stand up and go, dude, enough already, cut it. Because I forget when to stop, so he's going to remind me. I've known Jairus for a long time. I don't know if you know him. I've known him since he was about 10. He came to our house.
Oh, everyone knows me.
He came to our house and he had a sleepover. And I guess at about 3 o'clock in the morning, he didn't realize that our lounge isn't a toilet. Plus, he had silly putty, and he ground the silly putty into the carpet. And so in the morning, my wife and I are like, look at the lounge. And we thought, awesome, because we can ring the insurance company and get new carpet. So if you've got a room in your house that's like it really needs, invite them around for a sleepover and give them some silly putty. You'll be away the next morning, ring the insurance company. But I think that commonly in New Zealand, we often hear people say, well, you know, we've got to help our own people within our own country first. And I get why people say that. But I think that sometimes people say that and they're not really thinking about what they're saying. They've just heard that expression and they say it. The media is really pushing, talks a lot about poverty in New Zealand, etc., which is cool. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's poverty in New Zealand that we hear all the time. And oftentimes, sometimes people will believe that we should work within New Zealand first, but also I think commonly people don't realise about what poverty is like overseas, and it can be very extreme. So what I want to preface by saying is that this is not a party political broadcast, but I want to talk about a particular incident that happened recently when J.D. Vance, the Vice President, said this, as an American leader, but just also as an American citizen, your compassion belongs first to your fellow citizens. That doesn't mean you hate the people outside of your own borders, but there's this old-fashioned concept, and I think it's a very Christian concept, by the way, that you love your family, and then you love your neighbor. Now, you've got to watch me as I say it. You love your family, and then you love your neighbor. Then you love your your community or your country, and then after that you can focus and prioritise the rest of the world. And I think a lot of New Zealanders think that. That's cool. But he is a recent convert to the Catholic Church. He's a very serious Catholic. And he got a little bit dragged over the coals, although his name was not mentioned, because, of course, he's pushing an America First policy, as you know, the current government in the States. And he was talking about Ordo Amoris, which is the order of love or the order of charity. And this was a concept that was first written about by Augustine, like a million years ago. And then Thomas Aquinas got involved and further penned it. So this is an old Catholic teaching and a thing that they live by, the idea of being charitable to all people. Now, unfortunately for him, the Pope stepped in. Now, the Pope didn't mention him by name, but almost the last thing the Pope has said publicly prior to going to hospital for pneumonia is he was talking about this interpretation of Ordo Amoris that J.D. Vance had talked about. And the Pope said, well, this is a doctrine of the Catholic Church. However, people who have said what they have said, and he's referring to J.D. Vance, they are incorrect. Ordo Amoris is not about... And I'll put this up for you. Ordo Amoris is not about this idea of concentric circles of concern, where we start off with our family, and then we start off with our community, and then we start off with our country, and then from there, if we've still got time and room and resources and whatever, we worry about those outside the USA or New Zealand. And the Pope also went on to say what people need to do if they think like that is to meditate on the parable of the Good Samaritan. And that's what we're going to do this morning. So, and again, I do want to reiterate, this is not a party political broadcast against the current US government. It isn't. But let's have a look at the parable of the Good Samaritan. Luke chapter 10. I'm going to start at verse 25. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he asked, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" "What is written in the law?" he replied. "How do you read it?" He answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." "You have answered correctly," replied Jesus. "Do this and you will live." But this teacher, he wanted to justify himself. So he asked Jesus, and this is the big question, "And who is my neighbor?" Oops. "And who is my neighbor?" In reply, Jesus said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed on the other side of the road." Now, these were good Jewish respected leaders within this man's society, but they ignored him. And then a Samaritan, as he travelled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. "Look after him," he said, "and when I return I will reimburse you for any extra expenses you may have." And then Jesus asks, "Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers?" The expert in the law replied, "The one who had mercy on him." Jesus told him, "Go and do likewise." So, Why does Pope Francis think that we should meditate on this particular parable? What we see in the parable is a couple of things, and one in particular. The Samaritans were hated by the Jewish people. They were low-life, dirty little scummy. Their religion isn't pure. Their religious faith is not pure like ours. Their blood is mixed with the Assyrians and a whole lot of foreigners. They are low-life. They're not like us. We are superior to them. And yet the Samaritan risks his life. Because the road from Jerusalem to Jericho was sometimes referred to as the Red Road, or other times referred to as the Bloody Way. Because if you want to mug somebody, that's the place to do it. Now, I don't know if you've been on the road between Jerusalem and Jericho in the last 30 years. It's probably a 10-lane highway for all I know. But even up until the 1940s, it was a place of real danger. And so when Jewish people, certainly back in these days, when they traveled from Jerusalem to Jericho, they went as a convoy, and they'd have dudes who were armed. It's like going through the Malacca Straits or going through the Red Sea. You're armed, ready to shoot anybody who's trying to mug you. Now, you could argue, well, this Jewish guy who gets mugged, he's a bit of an idiot, isn't he? Because he went down on his own. He gets what he deserves. But that's not what the Samaritan thought. And so what we see with the Samaritan is this idea that, of course, he risked his time and his money and his labor and all the rest. But what he did was he acted outside of his ethnic group. And he acted outside of his citizenship. And he acted well outside of his community. And he even acted outside of his religion. He went above and beyond. And so when J.D. Vance and others talk about this idea of concentric circles of concern, where we start with our family and then we go on to our community and then we go on to our country or city or whatever it is, and then if we get beyond that, then we help other people outside. The Pope says, no, that's not how it works. And he says for us to meditate on the parable of the Good Samaritan because we care for everybody. Everybody is of concern to us. We care for everyone who has great need. And of course, as you may well know, with the America First policy at the moment, they have scrapped US aid projects. One of my boys in Cambodia worked for US Aid. He's unemployed now. And in doing so, people will and are dying. People who now no longer can get antiretroviral medicine for AIDS, etc. They are dying, and so are their kids. And so the Pope kind of indirectly dragged J.D. Vance over the coals with this. And then if we look further, this is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for others. Now, verse 17. If anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need but has no pity on them, how can the love of Christ be in that person? Think about that. That is a heavy verse, because we're rich. Us in Australia and Singapore and Mother England and Ireland, we're the rich ones, and Sweden and all those Scandinavian countries, we're the rich ones. If anyone sees a brother or sister in need but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in them? And we are the ones who have material possessions. This is a tough verse. Dear children, let us not love just with words or speech, but with actions and in truth. That's out of 1 John. So, the question there is, who's our brothers and sisters? is it just Christian people? Well, they asked a bunch of theologians to unpack that and define who our brothers and sisters are from viewing the whole of Scripture. And they came away saying, our brothers and sisters are not simply Christian people. It's the brotherhood of man. We are called to care for the whole scope of humanity, to care for them. So, oftentimes, New Zealand people will say, well, we should help our own people first. I get why they say that, but Christian people, we should do better than that and think globally. Now, you wonderful people, you gave us a whole bag full of money, us, to start work in El Salvador. And this is genuine. Without the money that you gave us, we couldn't have started the work. You good people. And so, because of that, we've been able to kick off all of this work that's now going on. For us as a mission, our emphasis is overseas. That's what we do. We work overseas. And my definition of the poor would be quite different to say what a New Zealand definition would be. My definition is that unless we actually give people a helping hand, they will not get out of economic and social poverty. We actually have to give them a helping hand to lift them out, and then they can get going. So we've been working now in Central America. We have work in San Pedro Sula in Honduras, and we have work in San Salvador, in El Salvador. We're also looking at Guatemala City, and we're also looking in Tegucigalpa in Honduras. But at the moment, we just have 2 projects in Central America. So, just to give you a bit of an idea, in San Pedro Sula, it's the second city of Honduras. San Pedro Sula, one year to another, is sometimes the most violent city in the world. Like, it's bad violent. And there's a particular area in San Pedro Sula called Chamalacon, which is the worst part of San Pedro Sula. And so we're choosing boys from Chamalacon to come and live with us in our home in a place called Chaloma. And Chaloma, you can see it, it's just north of San Pedro Sula. And it goes like this. The 2 main gangs in Central America are Mara Salvatrucha, or MS-13, and the other gang is Barrio 18, or 18th Street Gang. They kicked off in LA. And then they're like 501s who leave Australia, who get kicked out of Australia and come back to New Zealand. That's what happened to those dudes. They're in LA, they commit crime, boom, they get a one-way ticket back to El Salvador. When they were in El Salvador, they managed to spread out very effectively within that small country, and then spread into Honduras and Guatemala. They're the other 2 main. But MS-13 is viewed as being the biggest transnational gang in the world and also the most violent. These guys are every gang in New Zealand combined, multiplied by 100 on steroids. And their weapon of choice, if they can, is machetes. And they are scary and they are bad people. And so we work amongst boys who are at risk to ending up in MS-13 or 18th Street Gang. And so we specifically choose kids like this. And so in Guatemala, where we want to kick off, we met a boy who is, he's a man now, but at the age of 10, he first picked up the gun, and he became a sicario, or a hitman for the gang from the age of 10 to 16. Killed a lot of people, and they'd like to use him because he's like the most innocent looking guy you've ever seen in the world. So he's just the right sort of person. If you are an initiated gang member like those dudes, you get initiated because you've murdered somebody. That's part of the initiation process. In Guatemala, there was a girl who was part of going along to a Christian program. She'd go along each week, and then they wondered where she'd gone. She'd just disappeared. And then they found out later on that she had some sort of gang connection, and she'd been chopped up and put in a suitcase and thrown away. So the level of violence and femicide in those countries is just like off the charts. And so it's an exciting place. It's the sort of place that we want to be in. In a minute, I'm going to get Jairus. Why don't you come on up here now? We're going to read to you for our Salvadoran boys who you have supported. We're going to read to you. You're going to need a mic. We're going to read to you. This is what our boys wrote prior to joining us, but they still live within these communities even now. This is what they've written.
I have lived my life in one of the most dangerous zones in El Salvador. Here the gang has prevailed for many years. It was a place of death. Those who entered without permission many times were murdered. Everything was controlled by the gangs, and if a boy came from another area, they murdered him without hesitation.
Since I was little, I have felt fear. If I took a wrong turn, or simply if I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, I could die.
Many children in my neighborhood see no other option but to surrender to what surrounds them, the gangs.
Both of my parents are in prison. My mum is being investigated for having ties to the gang, while my father is a gang member. Us kids were forced to be with Dad when other gang members would come to our place to plan crime and take drugs. My dad wants me to continue in his footsteps.
I feel helpless.
From the window of my house, I can see a field right in front of me. For many kids, it's a place to have fun, but for me, it's a scary place because it is there that the gang punishes those who disobey them. At night, loud bangs are heard, muffled screams. I don't know what those people did to deserve it, but in my community, sometimes you don't even need a reason.
All I want is for things to change so that my two sisters and I can live without fear and have the opportunity to be happy.
The gang are recruiting children, looking for someone to convince, either with promises or with threats.
I've never wanted to be part of the gang, but in my community, the options are few. Many kids end up there because they feel they have no other way out. I have come to think that my future is already marked by the place where I was born.
One of our 16-year-old boys said, "My future isn't promising. Either I will end up in a gang or in jail or simply dead." So now these boys have come into our education centre, which you set up. And they write about their experiences now having been involved in the education centre. And one boy says, "I have the opportunity to study in a private school, something I never ever would have imagined would be possible. At the school there are Christian teachers who really care about me."
At the Empower Centre, every day we receive lunch and dinner. It's not just because of the food, but because of the human warmth that reaches me through those meals, for the security of knowing that I have what I need, the simple act of not having to worry about what I will eat.
Now, thinking about tomorrow gives me peace.
I don't feel like I'm alone. I feel like I have a family that supports me. My heart, once filled with fear, is now filling with hope.
Every time I think about my future, I now no longer feel that knot in my stomach. Now I feel like I can get ahead.
I am now capable of achieving my dreams. A door has opened that I never thought would exist for me. Now I know that I want to study law and be a good and great lawyer.
My story is being written, but I know that I will not be another victim of my environment. Thanks to Empower, I have hope that my life will be different. The Empower Centre has become my refuge. It's a space where I feel safe, where I can study, share, and learn values, and that I did not take into account before.
I like devotional time because it helps me reflect and find purpose in my life. Furthermore, the food they give us is a great support for my family. Before I thought that my future was gang life, but now I firmly believe that I can get ahead.
At the Empower Centre, I have found something that is difficult to find in my community: love, security, and the presence of God.
My heart's desire is to one day graduate from college and help other children get ahead, just like Empower is helping me.
So you guys have played a really big role in that. Now, I want to tell you about a story. This home here is the one in Chalome in San Pedro Sula. And the house parents is a pastor and his wife. The girl on the right is their daughter, and their son is up the back there with the moustache. And they look after these boys. I'll tell you about one of these boys. It's just stunning. He's from Chamalakon, the worst of the worst area. In fact, he lives right next to the rubbish dump. And he never knew his dad because his dad, his mum and dad got together when mum was really young. She was probably, 16 or something. And then dad buzzed off, so he never knew dad. And then later on, mum got together with an older man. And the older man already had 2 kids from a previous relationship, and they were older. So there's mum and there's the stepdad and our boy, and then they had 2 more kids together. Mum went off to America to find work, and she would have crossed the Rio Grande and snuck into America. And then so the stepdad was left with our boy and the 2 other kids. The stepdad got stressed out. He was an older man. He got stressed out looking after the kids while mum was in the States. And he had a heart attack and he died. They call mum in California or Texas or wherever she is, and they say, "You've got to come back, pick up the kids." Mum comes back. The stepdad's other kids from a previous marriage are gang associates. They come round to the house. They see mum, and they say, "We blame you for our dad dying." Pull out the gun. Boom, she's dead. And then they see our boy. And our boy is waiting for the bullet because those kids, they want to take the house. But they might not be able to take the house if our boy's still alive. So our boy's standing there freaking out, waiting for the bullet. He doesn't get the bullet. They do end up getting the house, by the way. So where's he going to go? He has no mum, he has no dad, he has no stepdad. And the stepdad side of the family, they don't want him because he's not blood. Where does he go? Well, if it was MS who killed mum, he could join Barrio 18 and get Utu out on MS. We got him. In his first semester at school, they go to a Maria Montessori school. Costs us a little bit of money, but we're trying to develop kids who are going to get to university. So he's talking about becoming a lawyer now. And so in his first term at the Maria Montessori school, he averaged 99.5%. In his second term, he didn't do so well. He only averaged 99. So he's going to be dux of the school, and he will be head prefect. This dude, he's just got it. He's got what it takes. And another boy here averages 98%. He's 1 year younger, and he'll probably also be dux of the school. Another boy's averaging 96%. If you just give him a chance, and that's what you did. You lovely people, when you gave us that money, that's what you did. And you also support our boys in Honduras. You support those kids. So how can I thank you for what you have done? How can I thank you? We are so grateful. For us, because I live in Christchurch, I want to have a relationship or a partnership with you guys. Not just so I can get more money, but so that maybe I can help you in some ways. But we are so grateful for your support, for what you've done for us. And so these We'll just skip through. These...
4 minutes. 5, 4.
Rude. That's quite rude. Who thinks that's rude? And so these are our Salvadoran boys. The boy second to left is the one whose mum is in prison, dad is in prison, he lives with his grandparents, and last week his grandfather died. What becomes of him? What becomes of him? And he's one of the boys who wrote a lot of that stuff in here about how his life's turned around. And the boy who talked about how if you turn to the left or to the right, if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, boom, they'll just kill you. That's the boy on the far left. So they are tremendously at risk. But these are not boys who want to join gangs. They don't want to. They just want a break in life. And that's what you give them. So these are some of the facilities, just really quickly, that you guys have done up. That's a new ceiling. That room there was an absolute tip. And it was actually 3 rooms, and they've tweaked it all around and done whatnot with it. And then there's also a study room. So you guys have enabled that to happen. So for us, we are so really, really grateful for your help. And just in finishing, again, I want to encourage you to continue being global thinkers. And it's not to put down spending funds and time looking after people in New Zealand, not in the slightest, but be global thinking, because the world needs more and more people exactly like you, and encourage others to be global thinkers as well. Down the back there, if you want to get a newsletter, sign up, yada, yada, yada. I'll be down there. If you want to have a look at a newsletter, whatever, that'll be cool. I'm down there so we can chat later on. But thank you so much for your care and concern and support for these young people in Central America who had zero future, nada. They had nothing. And you've shown mercy to them. Okay, thank you so much.